a dignified spark of aphorisms and true stories. You reap what you sow. You reap what you sow. My name is Kim Jong-suk, in my early 70s, living in
Recently,
Songpagu,
my
Seoul. My
husband
husband and I have been sleeping in separate rooms. It's not that I'm uncomfortable sleeping, but I can't sleep at night. Because I feel regretful about how I ended up here. So I think it's better to be alone. The past years flash before my eyes, like a revolving lantern. And today, I'd like to unpack that bundle of stories I believe many people will sympathize with. My story. This will be especially true for seniors who lived in a similar era to me. In the name of marriage, there were countless sacrifices and patience that women had to endure, and the conflicts and despair that arose within it. But ultimately, it was a process of finding oneself. Seriously, my life has been like a drama. No, it's no exaggeration to say that it was filled with a more complex and intricate plot than any other soap opera. My relationship with my husband in particular has always been a test for me. When we were dating, my husband was incredibly affectionate and only looked out for me. When I was 20 and my husband was 25, we were innocent and pure, and it seemed like we were ready to give everything to each other. At the time, my husband was showing signs of success at the company. He had just joined after completing his military service, and I was a freshman in the workforce, about to graduate from college. People around us also kept praising us as a couple, calling us a handsome man and a beautiful woman. I just felt like I had everything in the world when I was with my husband. His every glance and gesture made my heart flutter, and our phone calls that lasted until late at night were my only joy in the day, and a time to recharge my energy. The entire process of promising to get married, greeting both sets of parents, and completing the meeting was as happy as a dream. But after marriage, especially after having our first child, my husband changed 180 degrees. The affection we had as newlyweds was nowhere to be found, and we suddenly changed as if we had thrown off our masks. He pretended to be a respectable father outside, but when he came home, he was an authoritarian and self-centered person. Every word he said pierced me like a knife, and my opinions and feelings were often completely ignored. If my child cried all night, he would get annoyed and say, "How can you treat a child like that?" And if I stayed up late doing housework, he would scold me, saying, "Why does your food taste like this?" Even when I did things that deserved praise, he took my efforts for granted and even belittled them. I'm getting more and more used to watching his expression and reading his mood. At the same time that it became natural for the labels, someone's mother or someone's wife, to be attached to the 3 letters of my name, I felt like I was losing myself. Conflicts with in-laws cannot be left out either. I was the eldest daughter-in-law, so I don't need to explain what married life was like. I woke up to the sound of roosters crowing in the early morning. Got up early in the morning to prepare breakfast for my in-laws. Took my husband to work. Took care of the kids and worked hard at housework until late at night. Not only did I make kimchi, I also prepared food for ancestral rites and took care of all the household chores by myself. On days when guests came, I was so busy setting the table and cleaning up that my back was about to break. Yet, my husband always took my hard work for granted. Rather, whenever my mother-in-law scolded me, my husband always took her side. Everything my mother said was right. When I tried to complain about the injustice, she shut my mouth, saying, "What would your mother know? She's just saying this so that you can do well." Every time I secretly vowed to divorce. 3,000 times. I couldn't live like this any longer. The thought that I wanted to escape this hellish life right away never left my mind. But I couldn't bring myself to leave those little kids who were growing up looking only at me. I often spent nights in tears, wondering how these children would survive the storms of life without me. I realized that no matter how much I hoped for my husband, it was useless, so I held on, looking only at my children. The vague hope that one day they will understand this hardship, and when my children grow up, they will be on my side, where the only hardest thing to bear was my husband's infidelity. I was about 40. Maybe my kids were going through puberty, sensitive and needy. One day, the neighborhood lady started talking to me. She said she saw her husband talking affectionately with a woman in an alley. At first, I denied it, saying, "No, my husband is not that kind of person. No way, my husband often comes home late because of work, so he doesn't have time to worry about anything else." I tried so hard to deny reality and not believe it. But a few days later, when I found a handkerchief with a distinctly unfamiliar lipstick stain in my husband's suit pocket, my world seemed to fall apart. My heart skipped a beat, as if I'd been hit in the head with a hammer. My hands were shaking, my vision was dark, and I couldn't breathe. I questioned my husband while holding the handkerchief. My husband came home drunk late at night and flinched when he saw my face. "What is this?" My voice was already trembling. At first, my husband pretended not to know, saying, "What is this? What do I know?" But when I thrust the handkerchief in front of his nose, he finally looked at the handkerchief with wide eyes and lowered his head. That was just something a female employee at work let slip for a moment. "It's nothing." His excuse was so lame and unconvincing. "Nothing? Is this nothing to you? Do you think I'm funny? Do you think I'm stupid?" I shouted as if venting all the anger I had built up inside me. "I'm sorry, I just glanced at you for a moment." His apology sounded more like an excuse to avoid the situation than sincere. I was so consumed by anger and betrayal that I couldn't sleep. A wink all night. That night, I don't know how much I cried, clutching my pillow without the kids knowing. My pillow was wet and soggy, and my eyes were so swollen the next morning that I couldn't even look in the mirror. The wound from that time is still deeply embedded in a corner of my heart, like an unhealed scar. It was the most humiliating and painful moment of my life. When I think back now, I'm proud of myself for how I managed to hold on and not get divorced. But at the same time, I think I was really foolish. Maybe I was too young and weak at the time, and didn't have the courage to raise the children on my own. Moreover, I knew very well how fatal the scarlet letter of divorce was to women in society at the time, so I just chose to endure it. I had vague hopes that time will solve everything, and my husband will come to his senses someday. But expectations always turn into betrayals, My husband disappointed me many times after that, and my heart slowly, very slowly, drifted away from him. The feeling of love had vanished, and only a relationship bound by a sense of duty and responsibility remained. As the years of hardship passed, the children all grew up and started their own families. My eldest son studied abroad in the U.S. and settled there. And my youngest daughter lives with her husband, who works in Korea. Now it's just me and my husband. And he hasn't changed. No, you could say it's gotten worse. Even after retirement, I didn't have any hobbies and just sat on the sofa every day, holding the TV remote control. Even though I prepared 3 meals for him, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and even gave him snacks, he would always complain, saying things like, "Is this all the side dishes? And why is the soup so bland?" He didn't lift a finger when it came to housework. And when I complained that it was hard, he even laughed at my suffering, saying, "What's so hard about women's jobs?" Every time I saw my husband snorting at my words, my insides would boil over. The thought that I couldn't live like this anymore dominated my mind. Like water in a boiling pot, I couldn't help but feel my patience was running out. I was gripped by a strong desire not to spend the rest of my life feeling so listless and frustrated. In the end, I declared that we should use each room. "Honey, let's each have our own room now. It is painful for me to be in the same space with you any longer." My husband initially looked dumbfounded and asked, "Are you out of your mind?" But then he stopped saying anything. Perhaps he himself had a vague sense that his relationship with me was no longer what it used to be. Or maybe I just didn't know. It would come out like that. Then one day, my eldest son came to Korea after a long time, and it was a gathering of the whole family, including my daughter's family, for the first time in a long time. It was supposed to be a friendly family gathering, but the awkward and cold air between my husband and I wasn't easily hidden. My daughter must have sensed the atmosphere, so she approached me cautiously and whispered to me, "Mom, what's going on with you and Dad these days? The atmosphere is a bit strange." I hesitated for a moment, but then, feeling that I could no longer hide the sorrow that had built up over the years, I poured out my heart as if a dam had burst. From my husband's infidelity to everything that has made my marriage difficult, the pain of married life, and even his attitude of not treating me like a human being. My son and daughter looked very shocked at my story. Their eyes were filled with a mixture of pity for their mother and anger for their father. Especially the daughter said, "No, you mean Dad said that? Mom, was it that hard?" He said excitedly, as if he couldn't believe it. The daughter questioned her husband on the spot. "Dad, how could you do this to Mom? She sacrificed her entire life for you and us. How could you do something like that?" The eldest son said. There was a firmness in his voice. "Mom, I think there's something wrong with Dad. Actually, even when I was young, I often heard stories from neighbors saying they saw my dad hanging out with strange women. We were too young at the time to really understand what it meant. But now that I think about it, I think it was all a hint at my dad's messy private life. Mom trusted Dad and lived her life. But Dad betrayed her and deceived the family. My son's words made me feel like I was falling apart again. How much more did my husband deceive me without me knowing? The daughter, in a fit of rage, shouted at her husband, "Dad! How could you do this to Mom? She's lived her whole life like Dad's shadow." My husband couldn't say anything and just hung his head. His shoulders slumped, and his face was a mix of guilt and embarrassment. Only then did he seem to realize the gravity of the mistake he had made. But it was already too late. Eventually, even our children decided to step in and solve our couple's problem. My son and daughter came to me, held my hand tightly, and said, "Mom, Dad was too harsh on you. Now do whatever you want, Mom. We are on your side. Your happiness is the most important thing." Those words were such a great comfort. To me, it felt like the sadness that had built up over many years was finally being relieved, even if only a little. I felt a refreshing sensation. As if decades of stagnation were being lifted, the children suggested to the husband that he get a divorce. "Dad, Mom is having a hard time living with you anymore. Now Dad has become a burden to Mom. We sincerely hope that Mom will be happy for the rest of her life. How about we each live our own lives now?" My husband initially refused, but his children's consistent and firm attitude eventually convinced him to accept it. He probably couldn't go against his children's wishes. In a situation where all the mistakes he had made were revealed one by one, there would be no room for excuses. So we got our promised marriage. As you know, we are still legally married, but we live our own lives. My husband decided to move back to his hometown in the countryside and live a quiet life, just as I had wanted. He will live there, regretting the mistakes he made over the years. I am now happily spending time with my grandchildren, under the strong protection of my children. My grandchildren come to visit me every weekend and show me their talents. And my daughter and son call me often to ask how I'm doing. My eldest son, who lives overseas, frequently checks in with me via video calls, and he always visits me during the holidays to take care of me. My husband calls me occasionally, but I just answer him formally. What's the point now? In my mind, he's been a non-existent person for a long time. Looking back on my long life journey, I can say that it has been a turbulent life, filled with joy, sorrow, and pleasure. But in the end, we realize that every choice and action has consequences. As the saying goes, you reap what you sow. My husband, who had given me such a hard time, was eventually left alone, and I am now enjoying my old age, surrounded by my beloved children and grandchildren. I think maybe this whole process was a long journey for me to find true happiness. This moment, where I can live my own life without relying on my husband, is incredibly precious to me. These days, I go to a computer academy at my daughter's local senior center, have fun, interacting with my neighbors, and occasionally participate in charity, work to help the underprivileged. Do you know how enjoyable and rewarding it is? I live each day with enthusiasm, deeply enjoying the feeling that this is what it means to be human. Isn't this all self-inflicted in the end? My story might sound sad to some, but I consider this moment to be the most peaceful and free time of my life. I feel like I'm finally living my own life, which was suppressed by my husband and family. I hope you all cherish your lives and make choices you won't regret. And don't forget that sometimes bold decisions can bring greater happiness. Of course, I'm saying this under the premise that it can bring some happiness not only to you, but also to the other person. I hope that you will both live happily together for the rest of your lives, which are not long. Thank you for listening for so long. Rest well. How did you enjoy today's story? If you found it resonant, please subscribe, like, and leave plenty of comments. I would also like to add that this is because we can uncover interesting and good stories. A classy spark of quotes and true stories. See you next time. Goodbye. A classy spark of famous quotes and true stories.